Welcome back to the Breakaway Show with David and Fabian. We have a jam-packed show today. If this is your first time tuning in, what we do is we go live and we go over the most pertinent news of the day and we break it down in a very unbiased way so that you, the listener, can kind of figure out what exactly is going on in the world today. David, take it away.
Yeah, we have some interesting stuff to touch base on. So first of all, we have to look at poll updates, right?
Yep.
It's something that we usually do on a weekly basis. We also look at what Hurricane Helene has brought us and the federal issue that is currently happening and what Kamala and Biden's administration has offered in terms of federal assistance for victims. And tariffs. We're going to talk about tariffs. We're going to tell you guys how to talk about tariffs and also explain to you guys who is right when it comes down to this question of tariffs. So with that, why don't we get straight into the first thing, which is our battleground updates. And with that, I want to first start off by showing you how MSNBC is panicking. I know, right? Or sorry, this is CNN.
Performance in a generation, 10 points off the mark of Joe Biden, who of course won 4 years ago, was sort of that union guy, Union Joe, right? Won it by 19 points. She's 10 points off his mark and the worst in a generation. But look at where Kamala Harris is today. She's only leading by 9 points. That would be the worst Democratic performance in a generation, 10 points off the mark of Joe Biden, who of course won 4 years ago, was sort of that union guy, Union Joe, right? Won it by 19 points. She's 10 points off his mark and the worst in a generation. But look at where Kamala Harris is today. And she's only leading by 9.
Yeah, Fabian. So obviously those numbers aren't too helpful for Kamala's campaign, right? Those aren't the best numbers that we've seen. So I also want to show you what's happening when it comes down to Latino voters, because I think that is also something we have to focus on. Let's see. Oops.
Yeah, I mean, those numbers going down from 30% under Clinton to 12% to 19 to 9. I mean, that is terrible. If you're a party looking at that, you know that you're losing that vote little by little, and to get it back, I mean, I don't understand how you would even get that vote back once they've already switched, because it's not like, people in life switch from one party to the next, but it's very rare to see somebody switch and then switch back for some reason, unless something drastic happens with the party.
Exactly. Yeah, I think these polls actually indicate and reflect what we're seeing happen right now, which is a mass exodus from the Democrat Party. A lot of the minority groups actually start to leave the Democrat Party in such numbers that it's worrisome for Democrats, because that is what they've based their entire election off for decades now. Blacks are leaving them, Latinos are leaving them. And why? Because people are waking up and understanding that they just taunt them, they just say certain things to them every 4 years just to get their vote. And then they realize that nothing that they say actually gets implemented that positively impacts them themselves. They've looked at what they had happen under Trump, especially with Trump's tax cut and Jobs Act. And now they've seen just the increase of price of goods and whatnot. So let's look at this. This is another poll that I think
we ask a basic question to Hispanic voters. Which party do you more identify with? 37% now say Republicans, 49% say Democrats. But again, look at how this has shifted in just the last dozen years. In 2012, this was a 41-point advantage for the Democrats. It has come all the way down to 12 points, Kristen, a 29-point drop in terms of that gap there on which party Hispanics identify with in just 12 years.
That's insane. That's insane.
But it makes sense, right? Because we know that, for example, immigrants themselves are some of the most individuals that they don't like illegal immigration. Majority of them came to the United States legally. If they didn't come to the United States legally, they probably are now citizens who are going to be participating in the election. And they don't like the aspect of illegal immigration. And they look for themselves, which party actually incentivizes illegal immigration versus the one that wants to deter it while still providing individuals the ability to come to the United States legally. I think that's pretty much reflective of what's
and also
happening.
you gotta realize that a lot of these communities, especially from South America, are very religious, very Catholic, very Christian. So when you have a Democratic Party who was pushing anti-Christian ideals, it's naturally going to make them gravitate away from that party. And I mean, my family grew up very religious, and now you've seen we're all Democrats, and now everyone's conservative right now, a Republican. So it's partly for that reason. People grow up and they want stability. They don't want outsiders coming in, especially if they did it legally themselves. They're caring about their children because now they have generational families at this point. And the entire religious aspect. So when you see attacks on religious, when you see attacks on the things that people fled other countries to come here for, like the First Amendment, like freedom of speech, they don't like that. I can tell you, I don't like that. And my family came from communist Cuba. So I think it's a trifecta of those three things that are driving people away from the Democratic Party.
Definitely. I mean, it has to be this stuff. It has to do with immigration in order for them to see such a big change, 30-point change. I mean, just in, what was it, in 2020, it said that it was about 29%, 30%, and it jumped up another 15% or so. That's incredible to see. And I think that also shows you that this new wave of Republicans, this MAGA policy and Make America First policies, I think that is attractive for everybody, right? They make it seem like, oh, this only benefits white people or citizens or something like that. No, the America First policies are exactly what they sound like. They put the American individuals first, and maybe they'll worry about other stuff afterwards. And it's really attractive to these minority groups.
Also you have the optics problem, as you had a very incompetent looking President Biden. Latin culture, we like making fun of things. It's very common in a lot of other cultures as well, but I'm specifically talking about the Latin culture. So when you have Biden, all my grandma's friends, and they were all making fun of him. They said he crapped his pants walking, all these things. So if you go from that to Kamala Harris and you hear what she says and how she says it, it looks very inauthentic. She's not really saying anything compared to Trump, which has a kind of George W. Bush aura where he's a man of the people. Obviously, I believe Trump speaks much better than George W. Bush, but that same factor, well, I can relate to him. He's talking directly to me. This Kamala Harris, I don't even know what she's saying. And if you're English as a second language person, you really don't understand what she's saying because she speaks in such puzzles that even an English speaker, native English speaker, is going to have a hard time understanding what she's saying, let alone a second language.
I think also a key component here is that a lot of these individuals are fleeing dictatorship countries and governments and whatnot. A lot of them coming from Venezuela, for example, from Cuba. And what I think that they don't like, especially the legal migrants that are now citizens here in the United States who, let's say, fled Cuba, they probably see Kamala doing something that they've seen happen in the past, or their family members told them, right? This flip-flopping just to get your vote, I don't think is really attractive. I do want to put this also up and then see this. I think this is one of your favorite people on CNN, right?
The spate of polls that came out yesterday, Quinnipiac, our CNN polling, the Gallup poll indicators right now, the nervous campaign this morning is the Harris campaign. They're not where they need to be with young voters. They're not where they need to be with voters of color, working class voters. They're not achieving the margins that they need that Joe Biden was getting in 2020. And Trump's base is immovable. And right now, his administration and him personally are more popular than they have ever been. If I just say the spate of polls
when you go so far left, it's hard to come back. So if you're that far left right now, what do you do as a party? Maybe you have a split like the Republicans had when, under William Howard Taft in the 1900s, where you had the Progressive Party come in, and then you had two Republican candidates and they lost to Woodrow Wilson. So maybe the Democratic Party needs to go something like this, like really get a nice ass whooping this time. So say, hey guys, like we got to stop with all this far left crazy policies because we're not going to win for the next 25 years. I mean, you have to make up, as a party, you have to make up that deficit that you've lost. Now, what do you do? Do you do it with all the newly imported immigrants, which we know we're doing, or we know they're doing, to create a new class of lumpen proletariats or this new class of working class voters, because all the other immigrants now have become more Americanized? Do you bring them in and then make them the new Democratic voter, just like they've been doing? There's a lot of things that we don't know right now, but what we do know is that things are not looking good for Kamala Harris, and I don't see the men getting any better. I don't know what else she can do to make them better. She's given away up to the kitchen sink, and it's still not resonating with voters. So what do you even do at this point?
I think you just keep attacking Trump, right? And that's essentially what they're doing, is that they're trying to say that everything that Trump is going to do is actually going to negatively impact the economy or negatively impact you as an individual. But the reality of it is that everything that they are proposing, majority of it, is what Trump has already proposed or done in the past.
Yep.
So for people that think that Trump's tax cuts were for the wealthy, then why is she going to extend Trump's tax cuts at the end of 2025? Because in reality, when we look at IRS data, we can see that the individual tax income brackets that were put in place in 2018 actually help the middle class. They don't, sure, individuals who are ultra wealthy, they've benefited from it, but at the same time, the middle class benefited the most from it.
Yep. And
I think people are starting to see that for themselves and are starting to say, well, why would I vote for this fake cover band when I got the real deal in front of me?
I mean, if you got a guy who did a bunch of stuff and then you have a lady who's copying him and saying, well, I'm going to do it too. Well, why wouldn't I go with the guy who just did it the first time? Right? Instead of literally copying him. And I don't know, I'm not an independent voter, so I don't know. I'm registered independent, but I'm not an independent voter. But I would assume if any logical person says, okay, this guy says something, and then the day or a week later, this person does the exact same thing, does that seem disingenuous to me? Do I want to vote for someone who's just literally copying verbatim this other guy who I can also vote for? Mm-hmm. Like, why would I go for the person copying and not for the person who's originating these ideas?
Bingo, right? For example, why would I vote for somebody that says that they'll do $6,000 child tax credit when they haven't increased the child tax credit their entire 3.5 years of their administration? And they suddenly say that just after JD Vance says it on the Sunday morning shows. This is just one example of many things that Kamala's campaign has tried to copy Trump's campaign without actually giving credit for Trump's campaign or Trump's initiatives, while criticizing him on those very things. And that's why I ask people, when you explain this stuff to them, do they feel comfortable knowing that they're being manipulated? And if they say yes, then that's their problem. Honestly, At the end of the day, you are being manipulated. You know that, to get your vote. And that means that probably in a year, you're going to be typing, how can I switch my vote from Kamala Harris to Trump, right? Because they understand that they screwed up.
Yep. Yeah. And another thing she screwed up on, the Biden-Harris administration, is on the hurricane issue. And a lot of people are mad with what she just proposed right now. FEMA is running out of money, apparently.
Yeah.
All of a sudden. So do you want to elucidate that for us?
Well, first of all, I don't think that anybody thought that we'd have such a high death total from the hurricane, because the way it was perceived and the way that we felt that we're maybe 30 minutes an hour north of Atlanta, we didn't really feel too much of the effects. I mean, it was a lot of rain. Mm-hmm. The winds were bad, right? But we didn't see anything that we're seeing happening in Eastern Tennessee, Western North Carolina. And in reality, that is where the majority of deaths are occurring. Now, the death toll is almost 200 people. Majority of those are concentrated in those two regions that I explained just now. But on top of that, we have Mayorkas coming out and saying that, hey, listen, FEMA doesn't have enough funding to last through the hurricane season. Can you believe that, Fabian?
And yeah, actually, I do. Anything coming from Mayorkas that's inept, I definitely believe it, because that guy needs to be removed from office ASAP or resign for the good of the American people, not even just for himself.
Exactly. That's so first of all, I wanted to put that on there. So Associated Press reports this, that Mayorkas warns that FEMA doesn't have enough funding to last through hurricane season. Now I'll ask you a simple question. The federal government has infinite amount of money to move illegal immigrants across the country, provide them various incentives to why even come to the country. Why does FEMA run out of money?
Well, actually, I can tell you exactly why they ran out of money, apparently, because they spend their entire budget for the year on the migrant services, and now they have no more money for the American citizens, like always happens every single time lately, it seems like.
Fabian, but we're always told on our TikTok lives that that is a far-right conspiracy theory, that all of this stuff is not true, that migrants aren't being incentivized by NGOs and receiving literally cash in South America, Central America to come up to the southern border. And once they're already in the United States illegally because they entered through the gap in the southern border, then they are brought to a detention center. They're giving a number, a case number, to come back for a soaring court case. But then they're also giving an iPhone subsidized by the taxpayer. They're asked, where would you like to go? Would you like to go to New York City, Chicago? That flight is subsidized by taxpayer money. Once they get to those cities, these are sanctuary cities that don't comply with ICE or any extradition stuff regarding illegal immigration. So they be criminals, while you continue to subsidize them with the federal government funds that are, again, allocated for things like FEMA. So again, they receive free housing that is meant for veterans and homeless people. They actually kick those individuals out, again, subsidized by the government. Groceries, goods, food, all of this stuff is then subsidized again in these sanctuary cities by taxpayer money. So of course, FEMA, when there's a hurricane like this, is running out of money. And guess what also, Fabian? Kamala's administration, Biden's administration, offered them a whole $750.
750 bones.
Oh, good job, guys. I can't even, that's not even going to cover
Imagine.
the rent.
So, yeah, and as you were talking, I pulled up what FEMA has spent money on, and check this out. So $380 million in additional funding to communities receiving migrants, $110 million to the emergency flood and shelter program to assist migrants. New York got $146 million from FEMA for asylum seekers. The Department of Homeland Security announces the distribution of more than $77 million in congressional funding for communities receiving migrants, another $12 million in funding for the distribution, and another $340 million for a new competitive award process, direct funding to communities receiving migrants. So if I count that, that's 340, 380, 110, 104, 77, and $12 million.
That's insane. And no wonder FEMA doesn't have money to take care of United States citizens, right? I also just want to put this in. As of the latest reports, estimates regarding North Carolina's spending on illegal immigrants in the last year ranged anywhere from $1 billion to $2 billion. Okay? So this is North Carolina that is currently experiencing a crisis, the effects of Hurricane Helene, right? And they spend $1 billion to $2 billion annually on illegal immigrants. So currently, the governor of North Carolina is a Democrat. And I wonder, what is he going to do? Is he going to allocate money that's being allocated to illegal immigrants to the relief that Americans need? Screw it. Even if there are illegals, they are individuals in the United States that actually need help right now. And it seems like we can provide them the relief because we're spending all of that money that is meant to protect the homeland.
Sorry, guys. Like sorry, Americans.
Sorry. You're screwed.
we gotta import the new generation of voters. You're not voting for us as much as we like. Therefore, we're going to help the people who are going to vote for us, which is exactly kind of what it is if you really think about it. Why would they prioritize illegal immigrants over all these things? And then now there's a lot of instances where illegals are registering to vote. They're showing up to the doors and saying, "Hey, are you registered to vote?" "Yeah, I registered as Democrat." "Oh, do you have your paperwork or your green card or your citizenship?" "No, it's in the process." So we're living in very scary times right now. You see a party that's just has deconstructed itself because of the left, and now they're doing things like this, and people are pissed off. It's not going to help drive any more voters into the Democratic voter base by doing things like this. Even if you had voters who are Democratic, I'm sure they're pissed the F off right now with the government. Which government is in power? The Democratic government. So they're going to say, you know what? I want the opposite of whatever these people are doing to me. Trump started a GoFundMe campaign, which in 24 hours got about $900,000 for hurricane relief. Good. He's doing all the things that people want the government to do, and he's not even in the government right now. He's just a private citizen, So all these things, and her not even going until after Trump went to the site of the hurricane and then announcing this measly $750, which I think is right around what the Maui fire victims got. It's like, where do they put this arbitrary number? Hey, everyone's going to get $650, $750. But
While we give Ukraine billions of dollars.
$200 billion.
So,
And
Fabian, how much do we say that the federal government allocated for illegal immigrants away from, useful sources like for FEMA?
So this looks like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, almost $1 trillion.
Okay, $1 trillion.
I'm sorry, I was mistaking million but yeah. So almost $1 billion.
Okay, almost $1 billion. Almost $1 billion the federal government now spends on illegal immigrants. That's
just FEMA.
That's just FEMA. Okay, so FEMA spends $1 billion right now, a federal program that is meant to protect individuals in the case of a hurricane or provide them relief or whatever it is, and the resources, spends $1 billion on illegal immigration. The state of North Carolina spends $1 billion to $2 billion on illegal immigration. Tennessee, I just looked it up, spends $1 billion annually on illegal immigration. You're spending all the money that the state has and the government, and the federal government has, in the case that something like this happens to Americans, on illegal immigration. No wonder FEMA is running out of money.
Well, and check this out. This is interesting because FEMA's budget is $29.5 billion for 2023. So where in the hell is all that money going? I mean, literally, what are they spending it on? They have 23,000 employees. So you figure 23,000 at, let's say, 100,000 each. I mean, this is just a massive bloat of bureaucracy, it seems like, because if they're running out of money and their budget's $30 billion, how do you run out of $30 billion? Like, literally how? And you don't put any away for things like this when you know hurricane season comes every single year, like without question.
And just so people understand, FEMA is part of the Department of Homeland Security. That means that Mayorkas, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, who's refusing to do anything when it comes down to the southern border, which means that they have to provide all of the federal funding that they're receiving to the issue of illegal immigration, is essentially the reason why FEMA doesn't have money right now to provide stuff for hurricane season. So
yeah, I mean, imagine if you had a shut down border and people weren't coming, you would have to spend less resources on that. And if you didn't have those people coming to the border, not only do you not have to spend resources at the border, you don't have to spend the resources housing the migrants and feeding them and giving them phones and credit cards. Oh, wait, David, all of a sudden, it seems like there's a lot more money for actual FEMA things like helping Americans in emergencies, which is literally in the name.
Would you look at that?
Common sense.
Common sense.
Common sense, like JD Vance says, common sense.
Yep, common sense. Although these people have PhDs, they don't have common sense. Fabian, I just want to put this on here. I just want to, play a little conspiracy maybe for a second, but
yeah, this is good.
So he said, Pete Buttigieg, which is the head of the U.S. Department of Transportation, he said that do not fly your drones near or around rescue and recovery efforts for Hurricane Helene. And we have seen reports right now that the federal government is not allowing, individuals to retrieve stuff from their house. They're taking away certain donations that are going through not the government or whatever it is. So
same thing they did in Maui.
Same thing they did in Maui.
People couldn't get back to their houses. They couldn't get back. They were locked out. They had roadblocks, barriers. They have patrol cars saying, no, you can't come in this area. They're like, I literally live here.
Yeah, literally. All right, so let's hear what he has to say.
Our goal is to make sure that funding is no obstacle to very quickly getting people the relief that they need and deserve. There's also some safety issues that come up. For example, temporary flight restrictions to make sure that the airspace is clear for any flights or drone activity that might be involved in helping to allow those emergency responders to do their job. Our goal is
Yeah. So I wonder what that means if they're just trying to not show the incompetence that the federal government has right now when it comes down to rescue efforts or whatever they're doing. I honestly don't know, but I don't know why essentially it would be an issue if a drone is flying trying to assist with relief.
Because, David, only the government can provide the images that they need to provide, and then it goes to the mainstream media, and then it goes to us. So why would they want us to see something that they haven't approved via their mercenaries over at the mainstream media? It wouldn't behoove them to do that, because if we see something negative, then we're going to say, hey, you guys don't even know what you're doing, what's going on. And if we don't see it, then we don't know what's happening. So it's a smart play by them if they're trying to obfuscate with the truth, which is exactly what they do. The government is the biggest is the biggest doer of misinformation we know, and then they're telling us that we're doing misinformation, but only they can determine what is information and what is misinformation. So it's like you have the person lying to you, telling you that that you can't lie, but only they can lie because they're the mob.
Yeah.
They're organized crime.
Like lie to you and say that no, we're not subsidizing and using any of these federal funding that is literally taxpayers' money to provide illegal immigrants, a quality of life in the United States. But yeah, we're only going to give you $750 because, hey, by the way, FEMA doesn't have enough money for the hurricane season. So,
well, I think what's interesting is all of these videos, these exposés that have come out from James O'Keefe and other citizen journalists about how the migrants are flying on airplanes, what's really happening with the border, all the organizations situated all across South America helping the migrants get over the border, giving them maps and telling them what to do. All of this was exposed, not by the government, not told to us by the government, but in fact told to us by citizen journalists who took their camera and went to these places and investigated themselves. Had it not been for these people, and had it not been for places like X, we would literally never know that all this is happening. And that's what's scary, is what else are they doing that we don't know yet? But I like that we have citizen journalists going out into the field, sort of like what we do, and exposing things that we see. And then thank God Twitter's there, or X, for us to show the whole world.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, I want to say that the issue always is the ideology of the administration or the current, I guess, administrative state that's in power. But majority of the time, you have to understand that even when Trump was in office, the administrative state was still in there, meaning that the bureaucracy is the issue here. It's just that you're paying way too many people to do stuff that necessarily doesn't need to be done.
Comfortable jobs.
And then the other issue, too, is that a lot of this has to deal with corruption, right? Pocketing money or, essentially indirectly funding your own interest by using federal funding and whatnot. So you do end up in a situation where these institutions that are very well funded run out of funding because they allocate stuff towards things like that. And even if Trump is president, it doesn't mean that the administrative state is like all of a sudden fine, fiscally conservative, not corrupt. And I think that's the reality of it when it comes down to draining the swamp. It's nothing to deal with removing these corrupted people. It's actually, you have to completely remove all the corruption and the bureaucracy out of these institutions and rebuild them up from ground up. FBI, for example, it's a great concept, but right now it's being used as a tool to persecute individuals who oppose the ideology that's currently in place by the FBI. Whether it's going after Christians, whether it's going after parents, various things that we've seen in the past. But the FBI in its own is a great concept. Wouldn't you want to have a federal bureau of investigation? I would personally, but it doesn't need to be corrupt, and there's no way that it needs to be politicized.
Yeah, and that's been the problem with it for quite a long time. The FBI is overrun by career bureaucrats and people who don't have the same interests as the American public do. Just this kind of oligarchy, secretive association of people who control what you can't see, who control how long they keep things under confidentiality, like the JFK assassination, which had something like a 70-year classification. So they do these things all the time. They classify documents for 70 years. So by the time they come out, everyone's already dead and gone. And it's really hard to get mad at anyone specifically because you could say, yeah, but that was a long time ago. Mm-hmm. So this is the MO that they use. They do these atrocities. They either allow the atrocities to happen, incentivize them to happen, or when they do happen, we don't learn anything about it because of confidentiality. And then Congress can't even do its job and find out the root cause of things as they're supposed to do, because they say, well, Congressman, I can't talk about an ongoing investigation. Or as Congressman, I can't talk about that because it's classified. This is a public hearing. They use these tools and these methods to really say nothing. And I can see the congressman getting so annoyed on both sides of the aisle, because people do this in both parties. This is just the MO of the FBI.
It is unfortunate. It's honestly the motto that all the institutions have, because not just the FBI, but look at FEMA, for example. Exactly what we've been talking about for the last 10, 15 minutes is that FEMA is actually a relatively good concept. But right now, what it's doing, it's redirecting all of the funds that are meant in a case of an emergency like this for illegal immigration. And the federal government's doing the same thing by redirecting a lot of the funding that we should probably apply towards infrastructure or homeless issues or whatever issues that we have domestically, rather than they're reallocating those funds towards subsidizing a quality of life for illegal immigrants in the United States. It's absolutely crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I was reading this is from the budget.house.gov about how much money the government in total has been spending on illegal immigration. And here's a startling fact is that, let's see here. So I'll read this paragraph. It says, using the National Academy's estimate of immigrants' net fiscal impact by education level, we estimate that the lifetime financial drain for each illegal immigrant, taxes paid minus costs, is about $68,000. So for every person that comes out, even this is including if they pay taxes and they actually contribute to society, it's still a drain of negative $68,000 per migrant.
That's
per illegal migrant. If we have 12, 20 million people here illegally, we don't really know the number. I mean, think about what that does. It's insane.
Is there any economic benefit that they give us? Like, you know what I mean? If we spend 68,000 on them, did they bring us back 68,000?
No. So this is saying that even with the money they earn and the taxes they pay, it's still $68,000 negative.
Wow. Okay.
Negative. And here's another fact. So we hear a lot of times people say, well, illegals pay taxes and they don't get any benefits from the taxes. Okay. Meaning, I guess they don't drive on roads that are paid for by taxes, or, use law enforcement when needed, or hospitals when they need care, which are paid for by taxes. But this is interesting because it says, in addition to consuming welfare, illegal immigration makes significant use of public education based off I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong paragraph here. Was it? But basically, they pay about $5 billion into taxes, is what this says. $5 billion total,
crazy
for everyone, for everybody.
5 billion. So, and what, there's like 30 million illegal immigrants in the United States,
20,
right?
30, yeah.
20, right. And actually, somebody proposed a great thing. Obviously, you're not going to take these and deport these individuals. You should probably deport the criminals, the ones that have a criminal record. You don't need to invest too much money into that. You don't even need to make up new, agencies or any of that stuff. If they are criminals, that means that they have a record. And as long as that the state will comply with the federal government, then Trump's administration, essentially using certain agencies, will be able to deport the criminal illegal immigrants. I'm not talking about a certain family of illegal immigrants that used asylum-seeking laws to get in the United States and never went to their court case. I'm specifically talking about criminals. There's 19,000 of them, I believe, who are homicide criminals who are in the United States right now, and an additional 15. You can start with these individuals. We get these individuals out of the United States, and then we can start to focus on things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did find the paragraph I wanted to read. Illegal immigrants do pay some taxes. We estimate that illegal immigrants in 2019, now it must be much higher now, or somewhat higher, paid roughly $5.9 billion in federal income tax. However, as a net fiscal drain of $68,000 per person cited above indicates, these taxes are not nearly enough to cover the cost of services they receive. So when people say, oh, they're a benefit to society, well, I mean, these numbers here by the budget.house.gov says otherwise. And, it's interesting to see these numbers from the government itself when people say things like, well, they pay taxes, which is a very general term.
So 30 million illegal immigrants in the United States paid a total of $5 billion in taxes last year.
In income tax.
In income tax. Okay. Do you have a guess of how much in total the federal government took in as tax revenue?
No.
4 trillion to 5 trillion. I'll say that again with a T. 4 trillion to $5 trillion, right? So people saying that these 30 million illegal immigrants are paying so much in taxes, they don't pay. Actually, it's nothing. It's nothing compared to
the bucket.
A drop in the bucket compared to the 4 or 5 trillion million or 4 or 5 trillion dollars that the federal government takes in from collecting taxes on Americans.
I mean, look, FEMA, we just saw what they paid about something like $1 billion just FEMA, just for the migrant giveaways money. So that's $100 billion.
There you go.
That's insane.
It is crazy.
That's insane.
Why don't we switch gears to talking about some tariffs?
Yeah, tariffs has been a big issue, especially since J.D. Vance and Tim Walz talked about it on stage the other night at the vice presidential debate. If you don't know, David and I live stream every night on TikTok, and we have debates, and we bring on Kamala Harris supporters, and we debate them on why exactly they support or what policies and why she's better than Trump overall. And a lot of the questions that we receive, or a lot of the statements that we receive, are about tariffs and say, well, Trump doesn't know tariffs. Yesterday we had a guy said Trump doesn't understand tariffs the way he talks about it, so I don't vote for him. People say that tariffs are bad for the economy. Well, I did pull up some numbers because the numbers don't lie and these hips don't lie.
Fabian, before you give those numbers, not only do people say on our TikTok live that tariffs are bad, they're essentially just repeating the safe stuff that the politicians say, the Democrats say, that tariffs are bad. That right now, Kamala Harris, that's her main thing, that tariffs are bad. Tim Walz said it on the stage, tariffs are bad, right? It's not just the people, but it's the politicians right now saying that as well.
Absolutely. So one of the presidents that we could look to is a William Howard Taft, who was very, very big on tariffs. And for people who don't know, before 1913, there was no income tax in this country. It was all funded by tariffs, meaning if you wanted to sell your items in America and you were from another country, you would have to essentially, your product would be more expensive to the American people to incentivize producing things at home. And this is really interesting because during William Howard Taft's presidency, a lot of the food was made overseas and was coming in from other countries, and they had no standards. They didn't know what they were eating. A lot of the products as well. So it's almost like we're reliving this era all over again. But here's something interesting. So in 2017, when Trump put in all of his tariffs, the trade deficit was $350 billion, meaning we had a deficit with countries that were selling cheap products into America to the tune of $350 billion. Now, actually, let me go back. So when Trump went out of office and Biden came in, if Democrats think tariffs are so bad, here's what's interesting, is Biden left most of Donald Trump's tariffs in place. He has left the 100% on EV cars, 50% on solar cells, 25% on steel and aluminums, which Trump got a lot of flack from people to saying they're going to destroy the steel industry. In fact, they're still on. And semiconductors from China are now 25%. And in 2025, next year, they're going to double to 50%. So these are all tariffs that Biden has left in place. Now, that $350 billion deficit in 2017, when Trump put it in, is now at record lows. It's only $78 billion now.
Wow.
So he went from $350 trade deficit to now $78 billion.
Which makes sense why the Biden administration kept in place majority of Trump's tariffs, right? And it's just funny and so hypocritical. And that's why I keep referring back to them manipulating people to get their vote, is that they want you to believe that tariffs, Trump's plan that he put in place, are so bad. If it's so bad, then why did you keep all of that in place? And the other question is, why do you continue to impose new tariffs? Like last week, where, like you said, they placed 100% tariffs on EV cars coming from China.
Yeah.
I thought tariffs are bad for the United States.
Also, one thing Trump, and I don't want to play this whole thing here, but Trump just gave a masterclass in tariffs today. I saw the video. He was with David Ramsey interviewing with him. And he basically said, look, here's what happens. If you don't have tariffs and you have all these products coming in from across the world that are much cheaper, they're going to bankrupt the American companies that are making the products here at home. Then these foreign companies come in and they buy those same companies at a massive discount, and now they own the whole thing. And then you have no one in America manufacturing that's American made by Americans manufacturing these products. And it's actually very interesting. I never heard anyone put it together like this. But Trump had an amazing, and you can check it out. It's Trump, David Ramsey on tariffs today. He gave a masterclass, which is actually, I wish I would have saw this yesterday, because one of the guys that we were debating said that Trump, when he explains tariff, he doesn't know what he's saying. So he's very dumb. And I wish I had seen this video yesterday, because I would have said, hey, let's watch the video together and tell me what you think after you watch this video.
Yeah. That's unfortunately one thing that we're not able to do on TikTok Live, is just to be like, look at this though. Look at this video, right? But
yeah. Actually, I can pull it up quickly here.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's play it
about a minute. This is actually incredible. And, I like when people see videos like this where Trump gives a full explanation on things, because a lot of times all you see is a quick 20-second clip of something he said. And obviously they're not going to show you the good stuff. They're only going to show you the bad things, because that's what the media does. So let's take a look at this. Trump talking about tariffs here.
Because it can save our country, truly. And yet, I think because of graft, because of a lot of consulting payments and other things that given by other countries, we have so much fighting with politicians on using it. I saved our steel industries by putting tariffs on steel that China came in and dumped. And you know what they do? They dump and dump and dump. Everybody goes out of business. Then they buy those businesses very cheap, and then they raise the prices to higher than they ever were. That's one of the many benefits that they have if they want to do it. But by putting tariffs on, as an example, in the furniture business in North Carolina, it was so vibrant, and they stole our business. And they charge us, if you wanted to build a furniture place, if you want to sell your furniture in China, they won't take it. But if you want to build a plant in China to make furniture in China using their labor, they open it. We're doing the same thing. But a lot of people like, oh, well, we don't want to have tariffs. The country was at the richest point in its history in the 1890s. It was all tariffs. If you looked at William McKinley as an example, he was a big tariff president. They had committees that were put in charge of what to do with the money. We were taking in so much money. And McKinley would say, why should we let other people come in and steal our factories and steal our workers and steal our jobs? And why shouldn't we benefit? And he tariffed the other countries. And we made so much, and then they went to the income tax system later on. But they would actually they had a blue ribbon committee. Our country was so rich, they didn't know what to do with the money. And this blue ribbon committee was set up to determine how can we spend all of this money. And they took it in through tariffs. But we can turn our country around, make it strong, and then guard it with tariffs.
Sounds to me like he has a good grasp and understanding of what tariffs are, especially when his administration implemented the tariffs that are still in place, that have provided the federal government the source of revenue that it has right now. Because you got to understand, when Trump placed those new tax cuts in place in 2018, something had to supplement the loss of revenue that the government will have. We don't have to, but essentially there are certain things that we should probably invest into in terms of the government. Well, where's the supplement coming from? From tariffs. And that is why the Biden administration has been able to keep the tariffs in place while also maintaining Trump's tax cut plan in place. And what are we at with the deficit again? Remind me.
78. The national deficit?
Yeah.
$35 trillion. Okay.
Buckaroos, right? So it's economic prosperity. Now, Fabian, something that also I wanted to bring up is that a lot of the arguments that we hear of why individuals will vote for Kamala Harris or Democrats in general has to deal with climate change. In the top 10 most important issues for American voters, climate change is ranked in it, but it's ranked like 8th or 9th, sometimes 10th. Well, majority of the time we hear Democrats right now, especially when we do our TikTok lives, is that they are opposed to tariffs because of the various reasons Democrats told them to be opposed to them.
Yep.
That means that companies will still have the ability or won't have the incentive to manufacture in the United States. Let's not even talk about job growth and the long-term investment that has for the United States by incentivizing companies to be in America. How about we just look at it from a climate change standpoint? Wouldn't these greenists, these individuals who just are environmentalists and whatnot, wouldn't they rather have the manufacturer be in the United States than be in China? Where in China, they won't regulate the company's emissions, but in America, probably there will be some sort of regulations when it comes down to emissions. And I think that right there, which we saw J.D. Vance use this technique on the debate night, is the best way how we can get these environmentalists to start to agree with us that Trump's economic proposal, at least, and plan that he has in place, is more environmentally friendly than what is being proposed by the Democrats themselves.
Yep, exactly. And also, if you factor in global shipping, there's a net zero document, it's called Absolute Zero by the organization called UK Fires, which is a collaboration between universities across all of England. They say that in order that we can't go to net zero anymore. We're too far gone. We have to go to absolute zero, meaning that we can't offset our carbon emissions. We have to completely shut them down. And one of the things they propose is to shut down all global shipping for a period of 10 years.
Wow.
Up until about 2030, meaning no global shipping. Well, if you're for less shipping because it causes more emissions, and why wouldn't you be cool with us making things here in America, which drastically shorten down the logistic supply chain and makes it here at home, and it's a more green option. Now, here's something I do want to pull up because we were talking about how products are manufactured in China. And anyone listening who doesn't know, China does not abide by any emission standards. But in fact, here's where they actually rank in emissions by country. So China is actually number one, and the number one by quite a lot, because if you look,
3 times more than the US, huh?
3 times more. And they produce about 32% of the share of the entire world's global emissions, with the United States second behind at 12.6%. The number 3, India, 6.9%. I don't believe that whatsoever.
Actually, do right. We were talking about this. The reason why it can be this low is because they don't actually use any sort of emissions to, clean up the mess that the citizens create. Right? What do? They just dump it down to their streets, to the water, burn it into the air. Right? And that you can actually see in terms of emissions of how much shit that they just burn into the air.
Yeah. So China, if you want to get your products made in China, they're producing 32% of the world's emissions right now, according to this source. And if you want that to continue or get even worse, then you would propose doing what we're doing now, but doing even more. Get rid of all tariffs, make everything made in China. Don't worry about if there's another pandemic or anything like that, because the supply chains are going to be done. So then what do you do at that point? I mean, the circular logic doesn't make sense that they're trying to use here.
And a common argument that we always hear in terms of tariffs is that it's going to increase the price of goods, right? What is the key thing that we always hear from these environmentalists when it comes down to investing into right now for our future? You are willing to have consequences right now for a better future. That is the same thing that we have with tariffs. Yes, I understand immediately the price of goods will increase, but think about the long-term achievements that will have. First of all, in 2 years with the tariff plan, Trump was able to bring almost 500,000 jobs back into the United States. Think about it from a long-term perspective. If that means that a company is being settled in the United States, a big corporation, well, there's going to have to be infrastructure for that. And this is on top of the jobs that the company itself will provide. And you can tie all of this together to the fact that you don't need to ship stuff across the world, producing more emissions. You can regulate the company in the United States through whatever emissions that you want to have. It's a win-win-win-win-win situation. It's not even a win-win situation. It's everybody wins.
Yeah. Well, here's something else to consider that a lot of people don't talk about: global shipping and the cost of it. Because if you're trying to, if you want to make things better for the economy, and everything is produced overseas, when you have a situation like the pandemic that we had, the cost of shipping containers tripled, meaning to ship things over from China or other places literally tripled. Now that cost is passed on to consumers. This is in part why we had such massive inflation, because the cost of everything went up so high because we didn't make anything and we needed it ASAP, because we needed ventilators, we needed PPE, masks, gloves, all these things, and they all came mostly from China, including a lot of the medications that we as Americans take, which just baffles me why we would allow medication we're putting to American bodies be produced by a different country like China, especially. But this is interesting, so I do want to pull this up.
Yeah, I don't think many people actually know that the raw materials used in our prescription drugs in the United States is actually manufactured in China. Just like a majority of people don't know that the fentanyl that makes its way into the United States and kills our loved ones in various rural communities or whatever metropolitan areas is manufactured where? In China.
Absolutely.
Majority of the things that we rely on or that are used in the United States when it comes down to medical stuff is manufactured in China.
Yep. And if you look here, containerized maritime freight shipping costs have roughly tripled last year while experiencing significant volatility. This is an older article during the COVID era. But this is insane. I have friends in the shipping business, and they're like, it doesn't make sense for us to even sell stuff right now or to even buy anything because the cost of shipping is so damn high. When you're paying triple for shipping containers, that's a massive issue. That cost is then passed on to consumer. So would you rather have tariffs that we have, yes, maybe an increase, short-term increase in prices, or would you rather deal with China and do everything else that we said with the high emissions and things like that? But also when we have any kind of an issue, then our shipping costs is triple, and then we pay that. Like, that's not a win-win in any situation. So I think this argument that the Democrats have of tariffs are bad, let's keep producing offshore, has been completely dismantled right now. People need to know that. So if you're listening, this is the argument to combat people that say that tariffs are bad, that Trump's tariffs are hurting the American people, because as you just saw right now with data from multiple sources, that's just not true.
Exactly. Just engaging in this simple critical thinking that we just engaged in is all you need to do when you are talking to somebody that may be telling you the same stuff we've heard a lot of people already repeat over and over. Tariffs are bad, whatnot. Just take them through this process just like we went through it. And I'm sure that you'll get them at least thinking, if they're tolerant enough to accept the argument, you'll get them to think and just like we do on TikTok Live with some people, they end up thinking, and you don't know, maybe you just swayed an individual to vote for Trump instead of voting for Kamala.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it is just putting common sense into every single person that you possibly can, that you come across, that you talk to, that you meet, that you know already, that doesn't agree with you on Instagram. Instead of having these back and forths about emotional arguments, show them some stats. Be like, hey, listen, let's take emotion out of it. These are the facts. Now, what do you think is the best solution after knowing these facts, right? The Socratic method. Ask them questions to lead them to the answer.
Yeah, and we see some people hate that. They're like, I do that a lot. I pretty much use that as my debate tactic, is to ask questions to lead people to the answer that I want. Instead of me telling it to them, they end up saying it themselves using some sort of thinking, because they'll arrive at that place by me asking that question.
Yep.
And that is way more powerful than you sitting there and calling a person a socialist or calling them this, right? We like to do that actually in the beginning. We identify the individual. Who are we talking to? Are you center left? Are you a socialist? Are you a freaking commie? Like we've heard it all, right? And essentially right now, like, we equipped you guys with the best way possible of how you can just have a good political discourse regarding tariffs.
Yep. So, guys, I think that wraps it up for today. It is October 3rd, and we just went over quite a number of things. So if you made it this far, thank you for sticking around. Make sure that you follow David and I on socials. You can see them here in the ticker bar at the very bottom. I am Fabian Lux, at Fabian Lux, and David is David_Kate, Khait. We are going to do this as many days in a row live here as we can. So tune in at 11 a.m. And also, we're replaying the live at around 7 p.m., depending on what time zone you live in. Make sure you follow us, follow Breakaway USA on all platforms. And we are going to continue to do this and sway voters and instill common sense into people as much as we can. So thank you for watching.
Thanks for joining, guys. And if you want to see our TikTok lives joining in the evenings, it's hosted on my and Fabian's TikTok, and you have the usernames.
Yep. See you guys.